Hey everybody, welcome back to the Golden Bolt. This week we're going to do something a little bit different. I was in the mood for some old school NES platforming and I figured, well, why not start with the king? So this week we're going to tackle Super Mario... Whoa, story first? I know, that's different. I have a reason for this though. Super Mario Bros. Doesn't have a story. It didn't need one at the time. Video games in the 1980s were about just that, gaming. It was the experience that mattered, not the reason behind the journey. For what it's worth, here's the plot summary. Mario is a plumber tasked with saving the Mushroom Kingdom's princess, known at the time as Toadstool and more popularly known today as Peach. The princess has been captured by Bowser, the king of the Koopas. Bowser has also turned most of the Mushroom Kingdom's inhabitants into blocks, meaning that Mario murders hundreds of Toads during his quest. That's literally all there is to it. I'm not going to rate the game's plot, it would be unfair to do so considering the goal of this game was to be simple. History is something that people revise quite often to tell better stories, so you're probably under the assumption that Mario was already big at the time Super Mario Bros. Released in 1985, and you'd be wrong. When Nintendo took off with arcades in 1981, Donkey Kong was the big character here. Nobody cared about the little Italian dude saving Pauline, nobody even knew Pauline's name. They cared about the big bad monster responsible for her kidnapping. Mario existed, yeah, and Mario Bros. Did fairly well by its own merit, but it was nothing compared to the success he'd have later on in life. The Famicom had a horrible start in Japan in 1983, marred by product recalls, and an American launch simply wasn't feasible considering the American video game crash had happened earlier that year. Nintendo still didn't have a system seller for the Famicom, and until they did, they'd have to hold off on even considering an American launch. It was up to Shigeru Miyamoto to create the game that would crown Nintendo as the king of gaming. And here's some more revisionist history that I'm going to break up for you. He wasn't a game designer. He'd been responsible for Donkey Kong, yes, but he was an artist first and foremost. Back in this era, games were designed by the programmer, and the programmers at the time sort of had a stagnant idea of how games should be made. Miyamoto, on the other hand, could do whatever he pleased because he wasn't yet held back by his game designer side. So long as he could code it, he could do it. And that's what he did, meticulously designing every single level of Super Mario Bros. On grid paper before putting it into the game. He spent over 2 years designing Super Mario Bros. With his small team, even putting off his other projects such as The Legend of Zelda because of this focus. Nintendo had one shot to make a statement here, with the American market still adamantly against video games by 1985. But boy, what a statement to make. With Super Mario Bros. Packed in, the renamed Nintendo Entertainment System absolutely killed any remnant of the video game crash overnight. Now, if you see the title of the video below, you're probably thinking, so what happened next? How did Super Mario Bros. 2 come to life? Well, I'm going to tell you half of the story now because there's actually 2 Super Mario Bros. 2s. This one, known as The Lost Levels in America, was originally a Japanese-only sequel to the first game. In a nutshell, it's the first game, but more, with harder levels for more experienced players who ended up finding Mario 1 too easy. That's all I'm going to say for now, though. Because of how important Super Mario Bros. Was to the industry, and because I need another ranking now that story's out of the way, I'm going to give the history of Super Mario Bros. A Golden Bolt. Okay, so since I'm doing 2 games for the price of 1 here, I'm going to start with the basics. Mario goes from level to level, avoiding enemies, collecting coins and power-ups, and generally running and jumping his way to these flagpoles at the end of each level. For every 100 coins Mario collects, he gets an extra life, and there are 3 power-ups in the game. The Super Mushroom, which makes Mario larger and able to destroy blocks. The Fire Flower, which, as everybody knows, allows Mario to shoot fireballs that kill almost everything instantly. And the Power Star, which gives Mario temporary invincibility. Some levels put Mario underground, a few put him underwater, and the 4th level of every world is a castle, where Mario must defeat Bowser. Or rather, different creatures that are pretending to be Bowser most of the time. To defeat Bowser, you can dodge past him and use this axe to break the bridge he's standing on, or if you're Fire Mario, you can just burn him to death. The enemy designs here are all varied and iconic, from the Goombas to the Koopas to the Cheep Cheeps to Bloopers to Lakitus to even Hammer Bros, which actually aren't that big a pain to fight even though everyone likes to complain about them so much. In both games here, Mario moves using the D-pad, jumps using A, and he can run by holding down the B button. If you've ever played a Mario game before, this is all common knowledge. However, for the original 2 Super Mario Bros. Games, when Mario runs, he becomes very hard to stop. He's got Luigi-style traction here, and for most of the game you'll be sprinting, but there will be times occasionally where you're going to stop and take your time because of this. Even though he slides like Luigi, Mario doesn't have the high jump that his brother does. For longer jumps, you normally have to hold the run button down and build up momentum to make it. However, your momentum never seems to come consistently. Sometimes I can build up enough speed in one block length to make the jump I need to, but other times I can run an entire screen and still not make it. And if you mess up your jump arc at any point during most jumps, there's no coming back. The momentum already has you going too far forward for you to correct yourself. At times it feels like I'm getting screwed because I'm not playing the game perfectly, but the game's holding perfection just above my head. Whenever I try and reach for that perfection, the game pulls up its hand and laughs as I fail miserably. What makes the jumping issue even worse is that you really can't jump as soon as you land. You need a buffer for a split second or so before the game registers that you're on the ground before it lets you jump again. This makes what can often become tight platforming even tighter. For those of you who have played the old Mario games before and you're wondering where I'm getting this from, I'm mostly speaking from my experience with the Lost Levels. I consider myself a fairly experienced platforming guy, but God, Lost Levels stretches my patience. Super Mario Bros. 1 is a cakewalk once you familiarize yourself with the mechanics. Levels never really seem unfair, and the challenge gradually ramps up for you with a few spikes here and there. The issues I mentioned before really don't occur in Mario Bros. 1 because you really don't have to worry about that. They don't test the mechanics that much. That's because the mechanics are designed around the first game's levels to me. Yeah, Mario could probably wipe the butter off his shoes, but his slipperiness is built into the world to make it fair. By comparison, Lost Levels is designed in spite of the game's mechanics. Lost Levels players have to know that you can run over one-block gaps at full speed without falling in. They have to plan out and master their paths on the fly in a sort of endless runner level where Cheep Cheeps are jumping in from under you. They have to know that hidden blocks are a thing, they have to master the jump arc, they have to make sure not to eat every mushroom because this game introduces poison mushrooms that hurt Mario, they have to figure out these obtuse paths through mazes in these castle levels with no indication if you're on the right path, they have to use springs that sometimes work correctly and launch Mario insanely high but other times decide not to work even though the player is clearly holding down the jump button at the exact right time, and oh my god! Lost Levels is a trial of patience blended in with a need to quickly overcome obstacles, except the blender was broken so all we have is a lumpy, disgusting soup. I don't want lumpy soup, I want a good game! Yes, I know that if you jump upon landing you can stop your sliding and correct your momentum, but because the jumps are so precise at times, you don't even get to jump upon landing because you're already sliding. I'll be the first to admit that I use save states for Lost Levels. I pretty much exclusively use them between levels though, to save me the trouble of having to restart the entire game when, not if, I game over. Not the world, not the level, the game, from World 1-1. Continue here means start over, and retry means get your ass back to the title screen. You don't deserve to play this game, scrub. If a game is going to punish you with starting everything over when you fail, it shouldn't be a game where you're punished with death for jumping wrong once, or even for not knowing something is coming because, oh, I don't know, you haven't played the game yet. As a game, I hate Lost Levels. I don't hate many games, but I truly hate Lost Levels. It's not even bad for the first 4 or so worlds, but at a certain point it just becomes a game of trial and error. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy bits of it because occasionally it's actually got some well-designed, challenging levels, but those are almost always thrown in right in between more poorly designed fodder. And that just kills it for me. And I haven't even mentioned that Luigi's playable with different physics in Lost Levels. He's exactly what you'd expect. Mario with a higher jump and he's somehow even slipperier. I didn't even bother trying because that's just masochistic. I wasn't actually that big a fan of Mario 1 before, but when I recorded this review, I actually played it after Lost Levels. And I was surprised to find that it was actually growing on me. After playing the absolute extreme of the mechanics, playing vanilla old Mario was suddenly more bearable. Where I died before because I wasn't fond of the mechanics, I now flew by with ease. Sections where I'd rush myself, I now took my time and walked right past. Because Lost Levels is such a pain to play, I can now say that I really do like Mario 1. It's still dated, yes, but I can go and recommend this game to people now instead of just saying, oh, go play the first few levels, get an idea what it plays like, and then skip ahead. The worst part about Lost Levels to me is World 9. If you beat all 8 worlds without using warp pipes, you get to World 9, which is sort of a bizarro world. Colors are randomly different, level designs are weird, there's a flagpole underwater now, it's all off. It's almost like someone made the levels in Mario Maker. But I actually would have preferred that to be more of Lost Levels. These levels are creative, they have heart put into them, they don't just feel like the Mario 1 team got drunk and decided to make a ROM hack one day. They could be more difficult, I mean they're easier than pretty much everything in Mario 1, but I like the concepts behind them more than anything else in the rest of Lost Levels. And no, I'm not going to talk about worlds A through D. You have to beat Lost Levels a total of 8 times to unlock these 4 bonus worlds, and that is simply more time than I'm willing to put into unlocking more suffering for myself, especially right after Shamu. For Super Mario Bros. 1, I'm giving the gameplay a Silver Bolt. For Lost Levels, I'm giving it a Bronze Bolt. The former has an upside even if it is, well, vanilla most of the time, and it's a solid experience, especially when compared to what's essentially a troll game in its sequel. Instead of improving the experience presented in the first game, Lost Levels relies too much on intentionally bad level design just to screw players over. That's not fun, that's not cute, it's just annoying. I completely get why Nintendo decided not to release Lost Levels in America. It wasn't an insult implying that US gamers weren't good enough, it was an attempt to save us the money that could go towards a better game. Now, as you'd expect from games released in the mid-1980s, both games here look and sound basic to say the least. You can tell what everything is supposed to be though, so basic is by no means a bad thing here. The sprite designs are all nice, the animation is smooth for 1985, I really have no problems on this front. Lost Levels is obviously exactly the same in this regard. There's really no difference between the two outside of the actual levels themselves. My one nitpick though is level theming. There are 4 level variations in Mario 1 as I mentioned earlier. Overworld levels, underground levels, underwater swimming levels, and castle levels. There's also a Black Night Sky variant of the overworld that's used a couple times, and a black and white level that's used once, but that's it. Lost Levels adds in some other background designs, such as slightly different plants instead of the bushes, more variation on the actual platform colors, and so on. While I have problems with Lost Levels from a gameplay perspective, the team made the game look a hell of a lot better just with simple touches like this. The one thing that Lost Levels didn't change was the soundtrack, and I'm totally fine with that. Like the level themes, there are only a handful of songs, but these songs are some of the most iconic in gaming history. But then they were composed by the legendary Koji Kondo, so what do you expect really? The overworld theme is so simple yet eloquent, that it can and has been remixed, repurposed, and featured in so many other songs both by Nintendo and fans alike. What more can I really say? You know these songs, and you probably love these songs. They'll always be a part of gaming, and that's all there really is to it. Because the overall presentation is basic, and effectively identical between the two games, I'm going to give a silver bolt to both, but there's a caveat that Lost Levels does get the edge here. I'm going to be doing something a little different here this time. Because I was only really able to give the game scores in 2 categories today, I'm going to explain exactly who I'd recommend these games to instead of give little bonuses for each game. With Mario 1, well, I'd recommend it to everybody. I know that's kind of a cop-out, but even if you hate platformers, you should at least give this game a chance once out of respect for the game that helped save the industry. Obviously, if you're more into adventure games than platformers, you may not like it as much, but this game has held up remarkably well after 30 years, even if it is dated a little bit. If you're a fan of platformers, this game is a must. If you haven't played it yet, what are you waiting for? As for Lost Levels, I don't really recommend it for most people. I don't get frustrated at games that easily, but this one induced a fire inside me that burned far too hot for my liking. I would only recommend this game to 2 sets of people. People that consider themselves platforming masters, specifically Mario fans in that group, and people who like Mario but don't really like Mario 1. After playing even half of Lost Levels, players who don't like Mario 1 should be able to go back to the first game and appreciate it for being, at the very least, well designed by comparison. Both games are definitely replayable if you really want to replay them, as there's some hidden secrets like warp pipes or alternate strategies for getting through some levels. I wouldn't personally recommend replaying either that much though, especially not Lost Levels, but to each their own, I guess. In my opinion, you'd be better off moving on to other 2D Mario games. If you have to choose between the two, I can only recommend Mario 1 really. Lost Levels could barely have held up reasonably for 3 years in my eyes, let alone 30 like its predecessor. Like I said before, to me, Lost Levels really only deserves to exist to highlight just how good a game Mario 1 was. It shows that a lesser development team would have easily screwed up the series quickly, if not from the start. Thankfully, Nintendo had the best game designer in the world at the helm from day one, and frankly, I'm scared to think what would have happened if they didn't. So that's it for Super Mario Bros. 1 and the Lost Levels. Like I said, Lost Levels really made me appreciate Mario 1 for what it was, and what it was an excellent game at the time. It's not my cup of tea anymore, personally, but I can appreciate it a little more now that I've played what could have been. So with that said, let's move right on. Next week we're going to tackle the other Mario Bros. 2. So join me when we tackle Super Mario Bros. 2 USA. Thanks for watching.